This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Hello and welcome to Broad Radio. I'm Jo Stanley and my co-host today is the delightful Kerry Stanley. Hi there, Kerry.
Hello. Oh my goodness, we're in a real life studio.
I know, it's still fresh for us. It's only my second week here. It's your first time here.
First time. I feel like a real broadcaster. I've grown up and I'm here in the flesh with you. It's great. I'm very excited to be here today.
And thank you so much for stepping in. Lovely Nelly Thomas was going to be co-hosting with us today, and unfortunately she's had a little bit of an emergency. And I wanted to acknowledge, firstly, thank you for stepping in.
Great.
And this is the thing about Broad Radio, is that we are a community supporting each other. And I just feel really, really moved by that, because it's a very compassionate space and it's quite fresh for radio for me. It's not been the most compassionate experience in my time, so I wanted to say thank you.
Oh, absolute pleasure. What I've been loving watching too, and we'll talk about this shortly, is the crowdfunding campaign that's going on. It's how joyful seeing the comments that are coming through and the absolute support. Goals, tick, tick, tick. Very nice, but it also brings up other things, doesn't it?
Yes. We're going to get to that in just a moment. We have an amazing show for you. We've got investigative journalist Jess Hill joining us to talk about her latest podcast, The Trap, which is all about domestic abuse and violence and coercive control. A super important piece of work that she's doing there. We also have Lola Berry, nutritionist and best-selling author, joining us. She's going to be talking about failure and fearful failure. And do you even call it failure? I don't know. And first up, we're going to be speaking with Michelle Lim Davidson, who is from one of our favourite TV shows from the Newsreader. That's all coming up after this. Broad Radio is proudly supported by Chemist Warehouse. Chemist Warehouse, great savings every day. So as always, we say thank you so much for joining us. And if you are watching live, follow along and share your comments on Facebook and YouTube. If you are interested in catching up on previous episodes, you can do that with our podcast, Broad Radio on the Go, wherever you get your podcasts. And yes, you mentioned our crowdfund campaign, Cares, which carries on apace. You can head to Indiegogo and just search Broad Radio. You'll find us there and contribute to our crowdfund campaign, which is so that we can build an app, because we love Facebook and YouTube and all these, live streaming. Who knew it was possible? I learned that from the young people. But it only gets us so far, to only a certain amount of audience and people who are interested in watching this sort of thing. Whereas an app, take it wherever you go, and the whole wide world can listen, which is really exciting. So we're raising money, and the exciting thing is we set a target of $50,000.
How's that going?
We're at $49,000 roughly.
Come on, people, let's get over the line. We're almost there.
Can you believe it, Carrie?
I read something that you posted, Jo, not long after it went live, and it had this great momentum, and you were genuinely shocked by the response from it. Why was that?
Because I believe so strongly in what Broad Radio is and will be, and the need for it. But you can't always assume other people have the same belief, I suppose. And also that people, they're giving me their $25. It's theirs, and they could use it for fruits and veg. It could be petrol in their car. It could be whatever they need to use that $25 for, but they're buying a tea towel from us. Yeah. And that to me is, I find it amazing.
Well, I think, because like you, they share that vision, or they believe in your vision, because you're putting, what you believe in out there and articulating it so perfectly, unlike myself at this hour of the morning right now. But, they're believing in you. And your vision, because then it's not, as you said, it's not just about you.
It's not about
It's not
me.
about you at all.
No.
It's about the community that you're bringing together, and there's a need for it, and that's what they're buying. That's what they're buying into. That's what we're all buying into. I bought the T-shirt.
I can't wait to see all of us in our T-shirts. I know, we're going to look like we'll be in tribe in our T-shirts.
Yeah.
The thing is too, I want to establish too, I didn't come up with this idea because I want to create a radio show for myself to be on. Actually, I'm looking forward to programming full 24/7 radio where there are so many shows and I'm not on any of them. I'm in the background making the company grow. So for me, it's about the fact that I have heard so many women over the last 5 years say, I don't know who I am anymore. I feel like I'm disappearing. I'm not being recognised as my contribution at work isn't valued anymore because I'm sort of getting over 40. And I'm just tired of hearing women feel like they're not relevant because it's not true. We're stepping into our greatest power at this age. Wouldn't you say?
Look, it is. And what with that comes, just new adventures, great or otherwise, that uncharted for us. Women before us have gone down those paths, obviously, but they've never really spoken about it or given the platform to speak about it, perhaps. And so it's really lovely, I think, to be able to share all of the stories collectively from anyone who wants to tell them, then that will live on a place because it's technology, great, it's online forever to be, and so it's always almost a resource as well. And for down the track for anyone that wants to jump in and for our younger generations too, there's a place to teach and learn from.
So talking of uncharted territory, you are moving yourself into uncharted territory.
Yes. Made the decision to move to Sydney. Currently halfway through it. So currently my partner Lexi and I are squatting in our own home here in Melbourne because our removalist came on Friday and moved everything up to the new apartment in Marrickville in Sydney on the weekend. So that was a decision that kind of was led by my partner. She wanted to get back to Sydney and for her career and for herself. And I went, you know what, I'm up for a new adventure. And that with that comes a whole lot of excitement, but a whole lot of scariness. This has been my home for 23 years. I had my children here. McConnor's now 26, so he's not a kid anymore. He's settled down. And I think the biggest thing for me moving was, is he okay? And of course, he's okay. And my best friends are here. And so I flip between, it's bringing up absolutely everything. The packing was bringing up all the emotions and the tears and it's a pendulum swinging constantly. But I know that, it's Melbourne's just a flight back and I will be coming back and forth, for work and for friends and family and everything like that. But I just have to trust in my gut, and my gut went, you know what, you can do this and let's just go for it, however that looks.
It is a very, I don't think, I've never lived outside of Melbourne. Never, right? Which I have a bit of regret about that, actually. I'm kind of.
Are you well travelled though? Have you done?
No, I'm a very sheltered person.
I wouldn't have thought so.
No, I haven't. But I have huge respect for people who move cities. Amazing, but also I think to face a fear and go, I will do it anyway. That's not easy.
No, absolutely not. Interesting that coincidentally, having Lola later on to talk about that very thing, it's like, it's so true. To go, okay, look, this is learning to recognise what anxiety looks like. And we speak about anxiety across the board. It's a conversation that lots of us are having now, but recognising how that looks to you and how you can move through it, and just recognising, going, it's okay, and find the right solution.
Yeah. Anxiety is my constant companion right now.
Do you have a name for it? Do you call it I don't know.
I'm frequently saying, oh my God, I'm going to spew. I've said that a lot. Actually, I love Beautiful Ro, our producer, came up with a quote this week that she found from Adele, what was it?
It was basically that she generally pukes like a maniac before shows, but she finds that the more the puke, the better the show.
Oh, okay.
Can you imagine?
Is there a bucket under the desk I'm not seeing?
Poor old Adele having a good old hurl before she gets on stage, and she's
human.
I know, but she's so elegant and so incredibly commanding on the stage. And that is so inspiring for her to be so vulnerable and to share that with the world, but also for us to go, okay, so when I feel like I want to hurl because I'm so anxious about the fact that I'm putting myself out there, and let's face it, the more risk you take, the more anxiety comes with that.
Yep.
Yes, I want to spew, but I'll be okay. I'll do it anyway, just like Adele.
Just like Adele. Be like Adele. That could be.
Be like Adele. Oh my God. Well, congratulations on taking a massive step, and following your heart
you.
and supporting Lexi like
to
that
see
too.
where that goes.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
So, well, let's get to our first guest because
Fabulous.
I have to say, this is one of my absolute favourite TV series for the year. It's on ABC iView. If you haven't checked out the Newsreader, it is so good. Oh my God, I laughed, I cried. It's so clever. The writing is amazing. It's set in the 80s. So if you are from that era, the nostalgia.
It's incredible. The eye to detail, because I remember when this came out, and of course I binged it all very quickly, and that the attention to detail given in the styling and the set design and the art department, wow, they went to town and they did such an incredible job. The authenticity is really there, right down to the great shoulder pads, which I love to this day.
Of course. You do love a vintage blouse. You really do. But the fantastic thing is because it's set in the 80s and really harks back to some of the biggest events of that time. But the performances by Anna Torv and Sam Reed, incredible. The writing is beautiful. And one of my favourite characters was Nolene. And so we're very thrilled to welcome to the show Michelle Lim Davidson, who plays Nolene in the Newsreader. And she's now recently the AACTA nominated Michelle Lim Davidson for her role as Nolene. Hi there, Michelle.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Good morning, Michelle. Yes, your character Nolene, I loved her so much. And how was it for you to play, that character and that role? Like all the little nuances, because though, at times it's not all about the dialogue, is it? It's about those little quirky, the little looks, the little, I don't know, the movements. You capture that so beautifully. Did you enjoy playing her?
Oh, thank you so much. I loved playing Nolene. I think, you're not supposed to have a favourite as an actor, but she is one of my favourite characters I've played. I think, you're working with such a high calibre team, and it's so easy to act. It's so those kind of nuanced moments, or the detail. Of course, we're thinking through moment by moment, and making sure we hit all those marks. But also, you can't do that unless the team around you is also working at that level of detail as well. So, it made my job a lot easier, and I think, the environment felt quite safe, and I think like any workplace, the safer you feel, the more creative you feel, and you can be more vulnerable. So, yeah, I like, from an artistic point of view and a creative point of view, it was just a real joy.
I know that you're a lot younger than me, Michelle, and so when I was watching the show and going, oh my gosh, I remember when Lindsay Chamberlain was released. I remember those other massive news moments that you cover in the show, the Russell Street bombings, Chernobyl, like really profound childhood memories for me. How was it for you being so young? Did you have to do research into some of the events that you covered?
Yes, I mean, I was born just after the year. It's set in 1986, and I was born in 1987. So I was aware of a lot of the news stories. They're part of our kind of cultural identity. Something like the Lindsay Chamberlain case is so much. I've had a lot of exposure to that, considering I was not alive when all of that stuff happened. But something that kind of surprised me when I was doing my research, I just thought Michael Lucas and the team had picked, 6 kind of banging events from the 80s. And I didn't realise that they all did happen in a condensed, or I think it's just over 6-month period. And that totally took me by surprise. It felt like such big news, world events that actually happened in that time frame that we'd set the show. I thought it was just like a television kind of thing to just kind of keep the series interesting. So I found that really fascinating, and I'm able to draw on the experiences from some of the older cast, and also, the creatives and crew on set who were there making the news at that time period, and filter that into my work as well. But definitely I know a lot about all of those events, and I know a lot about the kind of newsrooms, and even had proper training of how to use all the technical pieces like the auto cue machine, or how to change my paper properly, or my ribbon in my typewriter. All of those things.
Typewriter.
I became a bit of a pro at it. I was like, move over, props department, I've got this.
That is so funny.
great.
Because I did learn typing at school. Did
It was
you?
mandatory.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
ASDF
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the only A+ I ever got was actually in typing. in school.
Oh, wow.
So I know it's a handy skill to have. But what about the storyline around the Sam Ree character, who it was just so heartbreaking to think of the homophobia that we assume is from decades ago. I know that people still face it. But that was an incredibly heartbreaking and moving storyline, wasn't it, Kez? I mean, I think that he played that so beautifully. And the HIV story, like it was around the time when HIV was first sort of, world news. How, as a cast, how did that feel telling that very important story?
Well, I know personally and collectively as a team on that show, we feel great responsibility to honour that storyline and to make sure we're telling it. It's not as easy, I think, to say if it's the right way or the wrong way, but you have an obligation to do your best to make the most detailed, the most nuanced story and show the most kind of humanity possible in that 60 minutes that you have available in each episode. And I think that Sam, he's a wonderful actor, and Michael Lucas, who is the show's creator and lead writer, and director Emma Freeman, everyone did such a great job of helping bring that story alive. And there is something that happens, I think, for good television shows or good pieces of theatre where the team is able to get what's off the page, the kind of text, the kind of dry dialogue, and bring it to life and make it feel like it's truly real and happening in that moment. And I think that's what helps an audience really empathise and feel connected to the characters in the storyline. And yeah, as I've mentioned, the team is particularly good on the Newsreader. I'm biased, but particularly good at that, and was able to create that, I think, magic over and over again for all the different stories that are crossing throughout the series.
So, Michelle, as well as being an accomplished actor both on the stage and the screen, writing is very much true to your heart as well. So, it's just coming off what you were just saying then, how important true writing is. Do you draw inspiration from working with people like that, say from the Newsreader or the crews that you've worked with over the many, many years in your own writing? Like, what inspires you? I know you've written quite a bit of comedy, but is there a genre that you really would love to tackle with your writing?
Yeah, writing has been an interesting journey. I have been really fortunate, especially in the theatre. I do a lot of development work, and I've done a lot of new plays for main stage theatre. And sometimes I've been fortunate to be part, very early days in the process, and see the development of a piece of writing and the journey the writer goes on. Slightly different, in television. Generally, there's a team of people that are creating a show and a story together and trying to find, the right words for the series. But people always said to me, you've got a good, ear, a good eye for details, for story. You should be a writer. But people can tell you, oh, you should, just be a writer. It's not... For me, it wasn't that simple. And I guess in acting, one of the biggest things for me was the difference between, acting's very collaborative. And suddenly as a writer, it's just me alone, with the computer,
Yeah.
Really having to have the strength and the courage and belief in my own words and what
it's
the story
hard.
that, and the stories that I want to tell are valid. So it's kind of, it felt like as maybe I grew up as, I'm emotionally, I don't know, went on a different journey through life. And I feel like that is what led me to writing. And so I'm writing a play at the moment. And it's just a project that I'm just ticking away at in my own time. There's no deadlines. And it feels like my project. So much of my life as an actor, I bring as much as I can to a role, but in the end, like for a television series, it's made in the editing suite. I don't get to pick what takes are used. I let go of my work as soon as I leave the set. It's not for me to kind of worry about or do anything more creatively. So for me, writing's very personal and something that I really enjoy doing because it's mine.
Also, I mean, writing is hard because you're looking at a blank screen and there's nothing, like, it's you, the thoughts in your head and the blank screen. And if you don't just find the motivation to put your fingers on the keys and just put the words there, then there will be nothing but a blank screen, which is quite accusatory sometimes. I look at that blank screen and I get really cross at it. I'm just like, stop staring at me. I can't handle the pressure. But
absolutely. I've been there.
Yeah, but what's really amazing though, Michelle, is that you're a unique voice. We're all a unique voice. And I really love that you're writing. I know that I've read an interview with you where you commented that, you don't often get to play Korean Australian characters, which was fantastic about the Newsreader, that you were playing a Korean Australian character. And your voice, surely as a writer, is uniquely yours as well. What a fantastic opportunity to get those sorts of stories out there.
Oh, absolutely. Nolene is the first Korean Australian character I have played on screen. When I first started acting, when I graduated from drama school in 2010, there wasn't even on the kind of main casting website, there wasn't a box to tick to be Korean. And I remember saying to a casting agent, "Oh, what should I do?" And her response was, "Oh, you could pass as anything. So just click whatever Asian people are there." And I was like, really? And, there just hasn't been the roles. I think maybe with K-pop and K-drama and the rise of, really popular Korean films like Parasite or the recent phenomena of Squid Games on television, I think that there is more interest in Korean culture, and it seems to be in the zeitgeist. So I'm hoping that means there are more stories, not just coming from Korea, but from the Korean diaspora that's around the world, and our kind of unique perspective and experience. And I'm really happy to have been able to share Nolene and be able to contribute to her story and collaborate and feel like I have some ownership. It's very different to just being plopped in, like, this is what the story you're going to tell. This is how she is Korean. This is how she moves in the world. I was really fortunate that the team on the Newsreader were able to include me early enough in the process and were very open to, how I felt Nolene should be traveling through the world in that time period, and include her, who she really is, in the storyline, and feel like I have some kind of, as I said, ownership of the story.
Well, we absolutely loved it. We loved the 80s outfits. I must mention that Janine has commented on Facebook that Nolene's character was fab, loved her clothes too. I was guilty of wearing all of it.
Oh, 100%.
There's no shame.
No, not at all. It's all back again anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Nolene was, I think, very stylish. And congratulations on your AACTA nomination as well, Michelle. It's just, we're so happy for you. It's well deserved.
Oh, thank you. It's so, I just took me completely by surprise. I didn't know why people were messaging me, congratulating me. I had no idea. It didn't even, dawn on me that it could possibly be an AACTA nomination. So I'm just thrilled and delighted and feel really grateful.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And thanks for joining us on Broad Radio. We're hoping that there'll be a new Newsreader series next year, maybe.
Oh, well, who knows? Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
And we look forward to seeing whatever you do next, Michelle. And a quick shout out to your comrades in the Puzzle Club.
I know,
as we say goodbye.
you have a Puzzle Club.
Thank you. They'll love the shout out. Well, now that you're moving to Sydney, you can be part of the Puzzle Club.
I would love to. Oh, I'm so there. Thank you.
Oh my God, Puzzle Club. There needs to be more of that in the world. Thank you so much, Michelle Lim Davidson. It's been just a delight to have you on Broad
Michelle.
Radio.
Thank you for having me.
We'll have more Broad Radio after this. Well, the Victorian Women's Trust has recently released a new podcast. It's called The Trap. It's a very brilliant podcast. It's written and hosted by leading investigative journalist Jess Hill, and it's all about domestic abuse and violence and coercive control. And it's a really critical conversation and informative podcast that we highly recommend. And Jess Hill joins us now. Hi there, Jess.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good morning, Jess.
Oh, it's good to see you. Now, the podcast is called The Trap, and I feel like that is a significant title. Is that true? And can you explain why?
Yeah, we thought a lot about that title. The reason we called it The Trap is that we wanted to articulate the trap of the actual intimate partner abuse, but then also how that trap remains in place for so many women and kids even once they've left, and is reinforced by sometimes police, the family law system, our communities, that the entire thing is a trap. And, later in the series, we zoom out to show how actually a lot of the fundamental elements of coercive control and the entitlement to having power over, that's reflected in our systems more broadly and in our politics, especially as we've seen this year. So the trap really is about how the trap is set and how you get trapped in a situation of abuse, but how that trap, unfortunately, can continue even when you've done everything right and left.
Jess, you've got this incredible podcast, a book, a television series, all on this, subject that, is really becoming more and more public. What led you into talking about this in the first place? Where did this drive come from?
Yeah, good question. I have spent quite a bit of time talking to my therapist about why I've spent the better part of a decade obsessed with this subject. But it's like any journalist who gets onto a topic, often it starts with a commission, and so it was actually a commission from Nick Fike at The Monthly, who asked me to write a long-form essay on domestic abuse in 2014, and that was off the back of the horrific murder of Luke Batty, and the incredible advocacy of his mother, Rosie. It became a huge issue in Victoria. And this was just before she was made Australian of the Year. There'd been very little in the way of those sorts of long features on domestic abuse. It seems strange to say now, because in the years since then we've written so much. Well, I've written so much. Heaps of other journalists have devoted thousands of column inches to this subject. But at that time, to really go in depth on that subject just wasn't really a done thing. And so I felt a lot of responsibility to, do it right. But, when I got the commission, I thought this is important, and I should do it right. But I wasn't really that interested in it. And then I felt bad about that. But it only took 3 or 4 weeks for me to become obsessed with it. And that's when I realized that, domestic violence is not just about an incident or a collection of incidents. It's about power and control. And it's not just power and control in your relationship. It's the power and control you encounter through the systems that you go to for help. And it's the power and control that you encounter in broader society when you tell your story and they try to minimize or dismiss it. So that's when that door opened up, I felt like I'd just been given this skeleton key to a house that I didn't even know I was living in. And suddenly it was just totally relevant to my life. And I guess what I wanted to do in this work is to make domestic abuse and coercive control not only viscerally understandable for people, and give language to people who have been through it, who find it hard to explain, but also to make it absolutely relevant even to people who feel like they have nothing to do with domestic abuse and have never experienced it and don't know anyone who has. That it's got to be, if we're going to have society take ownership of it, it has to be something that has currency for everyone.
I really love that you speak about those who are victim survivors, because it's incumbent on us who can speak and stand up to do so. And we interviewed Dr. Karen Williams, who's a psychiatrist, on this matter earlier this year on Broad Radio, and she made it very clear that when you are traumatized by this sort of experience, you can't necessarily be the person to speak up and stand. And those of us who are strong need to do that, which I'm so grateful that there are investigative journalists like yourself, Jess, who you've devoted a decade to it, which must have been quite difficult. During that time, what are the myths that you have felt have needed to be debunked around this?
Oh gosh, well that's work that could take me another 30 years. I want to say, also just on Karen's point, I love Karen. She's amazing.
Extraordinary,
and she's a great psychologist. She's really such a trailblazer in her area. And part of it is not just the trauma of victims, but the fact that if they don't have a conviction for their perpetrator, then they could be sued for defamation. So there's a lot of women out there who, because they didn't go through the criminal justice system, actually can never put their name to their story. And for me, it's been important to, I guess, stay on this story consistently, so that it, I guess, not because victim survivors aren't strong enough to represent themselves, but just because sometimes, as Karen's saying, they do need advocates to just stand there and do it consistently and platform them, and that, I think that a big part of the trap has been not only in telling victim survivors' stories, but platforming their expertise, showing what they have learned through their experience, and also what they've often brought with them, either through their professional background or through their education, that the victim survivors have an enormous amount to tell us about the experience of domestic abuse outside of their own story, and that expertise, I think, carries very strongly in the trap. But the myths, the myths that I've been trying to bust are the same myths that I had on board when I started writing about this subject. And it's not even so much that there's just myths. It's more like there's a lot of wrong questions, or a lot of questions that take us to the wrong answers. So if you ask as your first port of call, why does she stay, or why does she behave like this? Why did she go back to him? It's confounding to some people. Why would a woman go back on average 7 times to someone who has horrifically abused her? So when we're focusing on her behavior, it can look like it doesn't make sense. This person must have some kind of mental issue. It's only when we look at the behavior of the perpetrator that we start to understand why victims behave the way they do. Because the victims are behaving in response. And when perpetrators are threatening to kill themselves if they leave, when they're threatening to harm friends or family if they leave, when they create an environment of threat that makes it feel like you will never actually be safe from them, or they will pursue you through the family law courts, or they just continually try to appeal to your sense of loyalty and your strength-based feeling that you have the ability to fix them, where you feel like if you're leaving, you're failing as a wife, as a partner, that you haven't done your job in getting them to heal that inner boy inside of them. You know, there are a million reasons why women don't leave, and most of them they all come back mostly to the perpetrator. So, you know, it's not so much that you have wrong questions. It's fine to ask things like, why doesn't she leave? But firstly, we should be asking, what is he doing and why is he doing it? Because that actually will end up answering that question for us a lot of the time. The stuff around women, you know, I think it's 43% of Australians believe that women routinely exaggerate or make up, you know, allegations of domestic violence to get an advantage in custody cases. You know, I used to think that too before I started investigating the family law courts. And the fact is that unfortunately, in a lot of cases, when women bring allegations either of their own or of abuse against their children, even when the children bring those allegations, they can actually find that they lose custody, they lose share of their children, and can actually have custody removed altogether. So there's a lot of things that are back to front about domestic abuse and our understanding of it, and that's why the concept of coercive control is so powerful, because it doesn't just say domestic violence happened on Tuesday and then it happened again the following Friday. It says this is a system that never switches off. It's the same as what Grace Tame is trying to get across around child sexual abuse. It's not just that the child sexual abuse happened at 3:00 in the afternoon on a Sunday. It was the grooming process that happened before. It was the whole system of abuse that was what the child experienced, and is just as important as the incident itself. So these are the new and expansive conversations that we've been having over the last 2 years that I think is starting to really do away with a lot of the mythology that has come about largely because we've been looking at domestic violence as though it's just a series of incidents.
That's a really great way to put it, isn't it? Yeah. What I would like to know, Jess, is...
this is a very
bit of
feedback
feedback
going on there.
I'm so sorry, as I was about to launch into a question.
It's all right, I didn't hear it.
Oh, good. All I'm hearing is myself in my ears. Not very nice. Jess, I mean, all these conversations that you've been having over the last decade, how do you remain emotionally neutral throughout it? Like, I hear these, we see them in the media, read these stories, and they're just cut to the crunch. I can't fathom what's going on for these predominantly women and children. How? I mean, you did mention therapy. Great. Is that your solution? Like, how do you deal with it?
Definitely don't remain emotionally neutral. And part of, like, when I was writing the book, for example, part of my mission was to be the opposite of neutral, not in terms of objectivity, but in terms of my emotional connection to it. I didn't try to put up a wall because I needed what was happening to these victim survivors, adults and kids, to come through viscerally on the page. And to do that, it needed to come viscerally through me. And that has an enormous cost. Yeah. I think this subject matter has variously over the years driven me to, pretty close to the edge. And remembering that, you know, I mean, definitely there's all the self-care that you can do. I have not always been great at that. There's all the therapy you can do. But as a writer, when you're writing on your own, you're spending a lot of time on your own, you know, and there's an ecosystem of people surrounding you, you know, because this sector is incredible, and it's part of what's kept me writing about this subject is the incredible women and men who work in this sector and who have been incredibly supportive, and the victim survivors who are a privilege to represent and work with. And I've sourced a lot of strength and resilience from all of those people and the work that they've done over decades. But in the end, it's me in a room, often this room, and I'm left with those stories as I go to sleep at night. And to be honest, the worst the worst of it is not what happens behind closed doors, but what happens out in public view, in family courtrooms, in police stations, in the media. What traumatizes me personally is the way the systems respond to these women and kids. It's unfathomable when you start getting deeply into it, and it's like walking through some looking glass into a parallel reality, one that you just didn't know was there until you started looking. So I don't know how anyone would work in this area and not be affected deeply by it. It's a part of the price that you pay, but that's the price that, activists of all stripes have been paying for as long as activism has been around, for as long as journalism about trauma has been around. And feminists for 150 years have paid an enormous price for trying to advance the issue of gender equality and rights for women and safety and respect. And I see myself as straddling a sometimes uncomfortable line between journalism and campaigning on the issue of domestic abuse. But fundamentally, I'm a feminist, and I believe in a future where we can actually relate and connect with respect and love. And that's what I fight for. And as I join a long tradition of people who pay a price for that.
Actually, Jess, that's very much one of the things that's driving us with Broad Radio, because I think it's a fact, that the lack of representation of women in the media down the line impacts on the safety of women, because their stories
100%.
aren't told. And because when our stories are told, they're not believed, particularly in the media. So I thank you for the work that you do, and it's very much one of the things that drives us to straddle activism and media, and it's so critical. So thank you for that. The other thing I would say too is it's really, I've learned, important to put victim survivors at the centre of the whole conversation. And so just to wrap up, I would love to hear from you, because you've spent so much time speaking with courageous people who have year on year faced so much trauma. Can you share with us something of an insight as to the kinds of people that you've spoken with and the women and the children that you've spoken with?
So many different kinds of women and kids and some men as well. For this series particularly, unforgettable conversations with children, 2 kids who were subjected to coercive control by their father, who was a police officer, and their mother, who is fighting for the rights of victims of police perpetrators. Women like Karina Hogan, Aboriginal and South Sea Islander woman who's an ABC journalist who just worked on Incarceration Nation. She's incredible in terms of her experience, really fighting to keep her partner and the father of her children in her family despite everything he would subject her to, putting up with so much. And then finally, when she just loses her temper, the police being called and she being taken away as the perpetrator. Geraldine Bilston, who has been not only an incredible collaborator, but has become a friend, who suffered the most offensive coercive control from her ex-partner, and had managed to not only survive that, but now works, with other victim survivors in Victoria to advocate for improvements to policy and law reform. I can't tell you how many women and kids I've met who are the most epic and heroic characters that I've ever known. Every time someone writes to me, almost every time, the story is something that you would expect to see in a Hollywood movie. There are Hollywood movies going on in every suburb and town in Australia, most of them completely unknown, because these victim survivors occupy an underground where they walk around amongst each other, but we don't even know who they are and what they're going through. And what I'm trying to do is bring that underground up above and to show people and make people feel like it's safe to come out and explain what they've gone through, that creating a community readiness to hear their stories and to understand what they've been through, so that they no longer get dismissed, minimized and misunderstood.
Well, we say thank you so much for the incredible work that you have done over the last decade and continue to do. And I cannot recommend The Trap highly enough. It's an amazing podcast, beautifully produced, as your books and your TV series on SBS, just amazing work. So thank you so much, Jess.
Thank you, Jess.
Can I just say also, as we go, just to really credit the Trust, the people that we worked there with, and Georgina Savage, who produced The Trap. And there's so many people who've worked on this podcast who have made it what it is. And it truly is an incredible series. And I feel very grateful to have worked on it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jess. It's been great to chat with you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And we'll have more Broad Radio after this.
My workout routine comes with me wherever I go, and so does Bondi Protein. It gives me the post-workout nutrients I need. Fuel your body with Australian-made Bondi Protein.
Broad Radio. Talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au, or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis? We've got you covered. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Well, we've already spoken about this amazing next guest this morning, you and I, Carrie.
Yes.
She has hundreds of thousands of followers around the world. She's a best-selling author, a podcaster, a nutritionist, and she's here to talk about failure, which I think both of us have dived well and truly into, and fear. Here she is, Lola Berry. Hi there.
Oh, guys, I have been watching your show all morning and I love it. Love, love, love.
Yay, great. Endorsed. Tick.
Well, I mean, firstly, I did think, because we were speaking with Michelle Lim Davidson earlier, she is, of course, an amazing actor, and you are studying acting, Lola, which I think is a very courageous thing to do.
Very brave.
It means you do get to fail quite a lot, and I've just been studying in Los Angeles, and the Australian accent stands out when you drop the American accent like you wouldn't believe, and so I feel like I've fallen flat on my face over and over again, but it makes you resilient and strong, you know.
Well, that's good, because it's something that you're writing about. So you're doing your own research and doing it very, very well. Well, you have done. Of course, new book has just come out this week. How exciting.
Yeah, it's like 7 days old. Super new.
Launching in a pandemic. How fantastic. Well, how's that book tour looking? But you've come back from the States for it.
Yeah. And you know what? I had 4 flights cancelled. It was such a whirlwind getting home, but made it back and just rolling with the punches at the moment, and just feel lucky to be doing like awesome things like this, and got to do Tally last week, and I was like, this feels so surreal to be back in a real life studio. And I heard you guys are back in studio today too, and it must feel amazing.
Well, yeah, yes. This is new for us. We launched remotely, and so it's so nice to see humans face to face.
It's very nice, especially conducting like 2-on-1 interviews, to be able to kind of take eye cues from each other, which we could never do in separate houses.
It's true. Hey, so Lola, I really love your book, Fearlessly Failing, and I want to start right at the beginning. I won't go through page by page. Don't freak out. But the very first thing that you have in your book, which I've never seen before, is an acknowledgement of privilege. I loved this. So essentially, you're acknowledging you're a white, heterosexual, cisgender woman. You're acknowledging the country upon which you wrote the book, the traditional owners. And it was just a really interesting addition to the start of the book, an interesting preface. Why did you do that? And what did you put in there that you thought was really important to say?
I think we were saying this earlier. As soon as I moved to Byron about a year ago, the first thing I did literally within the first week was I got a tour of Byron with an elder, an Indigenous Australian elder who's called an auntie. And I was like, shivers, I've been to Byron so many times in my life. I've never looked at Julian Rocks, which is like an icon of Byron, like that, and knew it was a love story. I'd always hiked to the top of the lighthouse, and I'd had no idea that it was a sacred space for men. And I just thought, shivers, Lola, like you've been so ignorant. And someone said to me, I recently got a green card, which is why I was in America, and I said to a friend, I was like, oh, shivers, that was so hard. It took like 3 years of just like pounding the pavement and getting rejected and trying over and over again. And she goes, yeah, but you're white. Imagine how hard that would have been if you weren't. And it was just like, oh God, check your privilege, Lola. So I just think like to call myself out right from the start. And I knew as well, like I'm going to stuff up in this book, and I wanted to acknowledge that so much stuff has come to me because of the school I went to, the way I look, the way I speak. And I reckon I did take that for granted, definitely when I was younger and in my 20s, and I don't want to do that anymore. So yeah, it was just checking myself basically.
I love it.
Oh, absolutely. I thought it was terrific too. Now, fearlessly failing, like what really drove you to write this? Because, I mean, this is your 11th book, not on failing.
Yeah.
Let's just acknowledge that.
Failure 1, failure 2. I mean, yeah, we have a lifetime of it.
Your background being, of course, I mainly knew you as a nutritionalist and your wonderful cookbooks and heading in that direction. So what made you jump into this one? I think it's terrific. We need to talk about failing in a positive way so much more than we're currently doing, and not putting it as a cancelling. You know, that's a whole other subject matter too. You know, the cancel culture, which is so prevalent now. Like, how can we fail without being cancelled? And that's another question. Let's go back to the original one. Why?
So the book exists because I have a podcast called Fearlessly Failing, and the premise behind the book is Insta is a highlight reel. It's all the great things that we get to do. You don't really, it happens a little bit more nowadays, but you rarely kind of post about the crappy days or the gigs that you lose or, you know, the deals that go sour. You don't ever really talk about them publicly. And I just thought I'd love to interview people that are seemingly really successful, that have got so much of their stuff together, and kind of like interview them about the challenges, the lessons, the bumps in the road, the not so easy times. Because I know personally it's where I grow, it's where I face my blind spots, it's where I skill up, it's where I learn. And I think that ultimately, in the big picture, makes you more successful.
It's interesting you talk about cancel culture there, Kes, because you mentioned in the book one of your failures, and you're very, very vulnerable about sharing some of your failures, was when you named your diet program Stop Being a Fat Bitch, and the world lost their mind over that, and you very quickly realised the error that you'd made. And I was so, what an extraordinary moment, because it must have been one of those kicks in the gut, like, oh my God, I feel sick about what's happened here. How do you then have the courage to keep going? Because I'm terrified of accidentally doing the wrong thing. It causes me a great deal of anxiety, and failure isn't okay for me, failure isn't okay because if I hurt someone, then I feel like I don't know if I would recover from that. How do you keep going beyond something like that experience?
I totally agree with you. The idea of the feeling of hurting or upsetting someone that's very confronting for me as well. With that book, when it came out, it was called Stop Being a Fat Bitch, Change Your Mental Dialogue, Change Your Life. But I saw that bottom bit. And I totally had stuffed up completely. But what I wasn't prepared for and ready for was very quickly my audience, or what I thought was my tribe or gang, kind of turned against me. There was a hashtag Bin the Berry with photos of my physical books in rubbish bins. I think there was like a Daily Mail story, like career suicide, Lola Berry. And I just thought, wow, all of my work deals pretty much got put on ice, and I was legally gagged. I wasn't allowed to talk to media about it until Instagram then had like 15-second videos. You couldn't do a video longer than 15 seconds. And I remember I was allowed to do one apology video, and that then ran on a current affair the next night. So it was pretty full on, and I felt pretty alone, but it was, I remember I once got in trouble for saying this. It was one of the best career lessons because it taught me that, yes, I did stuff up, and I really had to own that, and I really had to apologize. And to this day, I'm still very sorry for what I did. And it also taught me that I have to realize that I'm human. I am going to stuff up. I am going to make mistakes, but I still need to have my own back, check my values, and keep moving forward. For me, yoga kind of really helped me in that experience, because I was able to just kind of be mindful, check in with myself, and be able to take each day just as it came.
Well, because you knew it wasn't coming from a place of maliciousness. You knew the intention was great. I remember, of course, most of us remember when that came out, and I remember the storm that came around that, Lola, and I remember being on your side because I got, I guess, where you're coming from with it.
Well, you're using that language that we use against ourselves. I mean, it was clear that, but when you talk about owning the fact that you're human, there's no space in the world anymore for people to be human. It's so upsetting to me how quickly people jump on someone who may have made a mistake.
Yeah, totally. We've seen it recently, even in Australia with cancel culture. But I just think if I look back, and I talk about this in the book, it's often not true. You've got perspective and can look back and kind of go, oh, that thing happened, and it actually taught me so much about myself. It was such a great gift. I know that you're very replaceable in media, and I know you guys would totally understand that as well. And so I try really hard not to take anything for granted in my career. And that's why I'm not afraid of not writing recipe books anymore. There are so many other people that can do it better than me now. I have no problem changing careers and focusing on acting. And, people go, what's your dream? I'm like, Steve Colbert. That's my dream. But I've been in meetings where I told someone that and they spat their vino out and started laughing at me. I'm okay with that now. I'm really okay with that. I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea,
100%. I think, it's refreshing to talk about failure in a positive light. I think it's something that we really need to get this message to our youth. Is this something that, we teach in schools or talk about in schools, this language that we bring into place? Lola, are you seeing that in your thought process? Do you think that we're teaching our youth that it's okay to fail?
Oh, I mean, how cool if that was part of the school curriculum. Imagine if we weren't afraid of the word failure and it was actually an opportunity to learn and grow. And so I would love to see that. As far as have I seen it, I haven't been focused on the younger education. I feel like this book sits with young 20, kind of finding yourself. There's a whole section on heartbreak and all my dating flops basically. And so I look at this book and I'm like, imagine if I was 20 and I kind of picked it up and was like, oh my goodness, yeah, I need to walk away from this situation. Or yeah, I shouldn't feel bad about questioning that behavior, but imagine if it was taught at school. How cool would that be?
It would be so cool. I do though, so my daughter's finishing primary school in 6 weeks. Right?
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so I was looking at what I'm going to get her as sort of a, graduation gift and what will set her on her way into high school. And I've come across this fantastic kind of guided journal where we talk about sort of growth mindset and fearlessly taking on challenges and all that sort of stuff. And then I started wondering, do we expect constant improvement too much? Where does self-acceptance sit, Lola, do you reckon? Because I don't want to imply to her that she should always be aiming to be better or different. There's got to also be an element of self-acceptance and say, well, this is it and I'm okay with that. Where does that sit for you?
100%. I think for me, that probably comes from an element of self-care. If I have a crappy day, the first thing I do is take myself to the movies. I know that sounds really weird, but for me, watching someone live their passion, like an actor act in a movie, or listening to the movie score that a composer has made, that recalibrates me in some way. And I think, in the past, I would have thought that was a waste of time. I'm a bit of a A-type, go, go, go personality. But I just think having this element of self-care, sitting with yourself, being mindful, also welcoming the feeling of hey, I'm just going to take it easy right now. There's nothing wrong. I live in Byron Bay, for goodness sakes. Like, it's very easy to take it easy here. But, you know, it's a slower pace. It's very easy to, you know, have a week where you're like, all right, I'm going to focus on doing yoga and slowing down the pace. I never feel guilty if I have a day like that, ever, because it's so important. And actually you wake up the next day usually even more driven. But yeah, I think taking it easy should be seen as a form of self-care.
I love the doing nothing.
Doing nothing does a whole lot of something.
It really does. Lola, it's been so awesome to speak with you. I have one last question for you with your nutritionist hat on. Okay. It hurts me that we're so close to Christmas and I'm very tired. Okay, before we even begin about Christmas shopping or preparing or anything like that. And so I'm going to ask everybody that I possibly can for advice on having a very lazy Christmas this year. I want all the trappings. I want it to be beautiful, but I don't want to have to make an effort. So can you give me a little bit of something I can do for my very lazy Christmas?
Are you putting Christmas on? Is it at your house?
Yes, I'll be cooking, yeah.
Yeah, so just do stuff that you love and don't be afraid of doing a bit of prep in the lead up, because that's going to take away all the stress on the day and Chrissy Eve. I think, like, my boyfriend and I, we're in Byron and we're doing a Harry Potter themed Christmas, you know, do whatever.
That sounds like way too much work.
No, I got all the decos yesterday from Big W. So good. I think make it easy. Do what you love, you know, like, there's no rules with Christmas. And as far as health goes, I have done countless interviews as a nutritionist where it's all about dropping the guilt. Enjoy the pud, my friends. Enjoy all the trimmings. Have the best time. Enjoy it mindfully. Food is here for two reasons. One, yes, to nourish you, but also to celebrate love. You know, it's a celebration, and that's what Christmas is. So enjoy all the things. But if you want to take away the stress, it's all about pre-work. Jamie Oliver has the best Christmas prep video, and he does it all a few days in the lead up so that come Christmas Day, he's chilling with the fam bam.
I'm going to check that out, Jamie Oliver's prep video.
And get people to bring a dish.
Get people to bring a dish is what Kerry says.
Delegate.
Okay. Yes.
Delegation is always great.
Yeah, enjoy the pud. I'm putting it on a T-shirt.
I think I already have.
Oh, Lola Berry, it's been a delight to chat with you. Thank you so much. And do get the book. I absolutely loved it. It goes into lots of lessons from how to get your toolkit together and all the things that you've learned from acting classes, which I really loved. I think you and I went to the same university, probably about 15 years apart. But you went to Monash Performing Arts, yes?
Yeah.
Me too.
How awesome.
And look at us now. We're alumni.
All the acting.
That's right. So, yeah, do check out the book. It's really fantastic. And I think a really great gift for a young person. Absolutely. I found it really inspiring. So thanks, Lola.
Great. Thanks, Lola.
Thanks, guys. Loved it.
All righty. Well, that brings us to the end of this show, Kez.
Yay. It was fabulous. Great conversations of very broad topics. It was wonderful. That's what Broad Radio is all about.
Broad
topics. I didn't mean that. It just came out. I'm back with you next week.
You are back on the show next week. We have the extraordinary Tanya Doko singing for us next week. I can't wait for that. I want to just mention another really beautiful comment on our socials from Donna, who is she's one of our regular viewers and we love her, Donna Stotzenberg. She says, slowing down or even staying still is crucial to development. We have to be able to stop and reflect and spend some time simply being.
Wise words there, Donna.
Oh, I love it so much. Hey, Kez, I'll see you next week. We'll be back with Broad Radio next Tuesday.